Marcus Chen had seen plenty of weird things during his 3 years working the night shift at the Kepler Station trading post, but nothing quite like the small figure huddled outside the airlock doors. The station orbited a backwater planet in the Vega system, serving as a refueling stop for merchants and travelers from dozens of different species. Most aliens who passed through were either wealthy traders or their well-equipped crews, so the sight of someone sitting barefoot in the cold metallic corridor was unusual. The creature was small, maybe 4 feet tall, with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer under the harsh station lighting. Her features were delicate and almost human-like, except for the large violet eyes that seemed too big for her face, and the tiny gill slits along her neck that fluttered with each breath. She wore a tattered jumpsuit that had seen better days, and her feet were completely bare against the cold deck plating. Marcus paused in his routine security patrol, his magnetic boots clicking against the floor. The girl looked up at him with those enormous eyes, and he could see exhaustion and fear written across her alien features. She said something in a language he didn't recognize, her voice melodic but weak. "Hey there," Marcus said softly, crouching down to her level. "You okay?" She tilted her head, clearly not understanding his words, but seeming to recognize the gentle tone. She pointed to her feet and then gestured toward the docking bay where a battered cargo ship sat in one of the berths. Marcus followed her gaze and saw several larger aliens loading crates, their movements sharp and aggressive. Marcus had worked security long enough to recognize trouble when he saw it. The way the girl flinched when she looked toward the ship, the way she tried to make herself smaller against the wall, the obvious signs of exhaustion and malnutrition. He'd seen it before with indentured workers and worse. Without really thinking about it, Marcus sat down beside her and began unlacing his boots. They were standard-issue security boots, black synthetic leather with magnetic soles for zero-gravity work. Nothing fancy, but they were warm and waterproof and had served him well for the past 2 years. The alien girl watched with wide eyes as he pulled off his socks and then gently took one of her small feet in his hands. Her skin was ice cold, and he could feel her trembling. The boots were way too big for her, but he laced them loosely and used his socks as extra padding. "There," he said, standing up in his bare feet against the cold deck. "That should help." She looked down at the oversized boots, then back up at his face. Tears began flowing from those violet eyes as she stood and wrapped her thin arms around his waist in a fierce hug. She spoke again in her musical language, and while Marcus couldn't understand the words, the gratitude in her voice was unmistakable. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed down the corridor, and the girl immediately tensed. 3 large aliens appeared around the corner, their scaled skin a mottled green-brown and their eyes small and cruel. They wore the kind of practical clothing that suggested they worked in manual labor, but the energy weapons at their hips marked them as something more dangerous. The largest of the 3, standing nearly 7 feet tall, growled something at the girl in what Marcus assumed was their native language. She shrank back against the wall, but the boots made it impossible for her to make herself as small as before. "Problem here?" Marcus asked, stepping between the aliens and the girl. His hand moved instinctively to his sidearm, though he hoped it wouldn't come to that. The leader looked Marcus up and down with obvious disdain. When he spoke, it was in heavily accented standard. "Human, move, girl belongs to us." "Belongs to you?" Marcus kept his voice level, but his muscles tensed. "She's a person, not property." The alien laughed, a harsh sound like grinding metal. "Stupid human, she is Cathurian, her people owe debt. She works until debt is paid." Marcus had heard of the Cathurians, though he'd never met one before. They were supposedly an advanced species from the far rim, known for their artistry and scientific achievements. What he was looking at didn't match those descriptions at all. "What kind of debt?" he asked. "Her world, we helped them, now they pay." The alien's hand moved to his weapon. "Move, human, this not your concern." But as Marcus looked down at the girl clinging to his oversized boots, her entire body shaking with fear, he realized it absolutely was his concern. Some things were bigger than politics or interstellar law. Some things came down to basic human decency. "I don't think so," Marcus said quietly. The tension in the corridor crackled like electricity before a storm. Marcus could feel the girl's small hands gripping the back of his uniform as the 3 aliens spread out in what was clearly a practiced intimidation formation. The leader's scaled lips pulled back to reveal rows of sharp teeth. You make mistake, human, the leader hissed. We are hegemony, we take what is owed. Marcus had heard that name before in security briefings. The hegemony was a loose coalition of species that operated in the outer systems, nominally legitimate but with connections to slavery and worse. They had enough political clout that most stations looked the other way when they passed through. Not on my station, Marcus replied, his hand now resting openly on his weapon. And definitely not while I'm watching. The leader tilted his massive head, studying Marcus like a predator sizing up potential prey. One human against 3 hegemony warriors. You are brave or stupid. Probably both, Marcus admitted, but that little girl isn't going anywhere with you. What happened next unfolded in the space of heartbeats. The leader's hand flashed toward his weapon just as Marcus drew his own. The corridor filled with the whine of energy dischargers and the sharp smell of ozone. When the light faded, 2 of the aliens lay unconscious on the deck, their weapons scattered while the third clutched a wounded arm. Marcus kept his weapon trained on the remaining alien while checking himself for injuries. His security training had kicked in automatically, but he was surprised at how fast everything had happened. Behind him, the girl was speaking rapidly in her musical language, and he could hear excitement mixed with the fear. You will regret this, the wounded alien snarled as he backed away. Hegemony does not forget. Hegemony does not forgive. Good, Marcus said. Tell them Marcus Chen sends his regards. After the aliens retreated to their ship, Marcus helped the girl to her feet. She looked up at him with those enormous violet eyes, and he could see something had changed. The fear was still there, but it was mixed with something else now. Hope, maybe, or determination. Over the next few hours, Marcus learned more about his unexpected charge. Using the station's translation matrix and a lot of pointing, he discovered her name was something like Lyrale, though the musical tones of her language didn't translate well to human sounds. She was indeed Cathurian, and her story was heartbreaking. The Cathurians had once been a peaceful, advanced civilization known throughout the galaxy for their incredible artistic achievements and scientific discoveries. Their homeworld of Kith was famous for floating crystal cities that sang in harmony with the planet's magnetic field. But 3 years ago, a plague had swept through their population, killing millions and destroying their infrastructure. The hegemony had arrived offering aid, medical supplies, and technology to help rebuild. The desperate Cathurian government had accepted, not understanding the true cost of hegemony, generosity. Now entire families were being shipped off-world as indentured servants to pay off the debt their planet supposedly owed. Lyrale had been torn from her family when she was barely old enough to work. For months, she'd labored in the hegemony's mining operations, her delicate hands scarred from handling industrial equipment. The boots Marcus had given her were the first kindness she'd experienced since leaving her homeworld. As Marcus listened to her story through the translation system, he felt something burning in his chest. Anger, yes, but also something deeper. Throughout human history, whenever people had encountered injustice on this scale, they'd found ways to fight back. It was what made humans human, their stubborn refusal to accept that might made right. Station Commander Chen to Security Office 7, his communicator crackled. Marcus frowned. His father was the station commander, but they rarely spoke during duty hours. On my way, sir. He looked down at Lyrale, who was carefully examining the oversized boots he'd given her. Stay here, he said gently. I'll be right back. But when he reached his father's office, he found more than just Commander Chen waiting for him. 3 figures in the distinctive blue uniforms of Galactic Commerce Authority sat around the conference table, their expressions grim. His father's weathered face looked troubled. Marcus, sit down, his father said quietly. We need to talk. The lead GCA officer, a stern woman with graying hair, leaned forward. Officer Chen, we understand you had an altercation with hegemony personnel earlier tonight. Yes, ma'am. They were attempting to coerce a miner into what appeared to be forced labor. The hegemony has filed a complaint alleging theft of their property and assault on their crew members. She paused, studying his face. They're demanding we turn over both you and the Cathurian girl for prosecution under hegemony law. Marcus felt his stomach drop. Property, she's a living being. According to hegemony documentation, she's an indentured servant working off a legitimate debt. The officer's voice was carefully neutral. Legally, we're required to cooperate with their request. Commander Chen spoke up. his voice tight with controlled anger. The hegemony is invoking Article 12 of the Interspecies Commerce Treaty. As a registered trading station, we have to comply or risk losing our license. Marcus looked between his father and the GCA officers, understanding dawning. Without their trading license, Kepler Station would be forced to close. Hundreds of families would lose their livelihoods. The economic consequences would ripple through the entire system. "How long do I have?" Marcus asked quietly. "Their ship is scheduled to depart in 6 hours," the GCA officer replied. "I'm sorry, Officer Chen. We'll do what we can to ensure you receive fair treatment, but our hands are tied." As Marcus walked back to where Lyreley waited, his mind raced. 6 hours to figure out how to save an alien girl and possibly himself from a lifetime of slavery. 6 hours to find a solution that wouldn't destroy the lives of everyone on the station. But as he rounded the corner and saw Lyreley still sitting there in his oversized boots, carefully practicing human words with the translation system, Marcus realized he'd already made his choice. Some things were worth fighting for, no matter the cost. Marcus found Lyreley exactly where he'd left her, but she wasn't alone. Dr. Sarah Kim, the station's chief medical officer, was kneeling beside her with a portable scanner, speaking in gentle tones while the translation system worked between them. "Marcus," Dr. Kim said as he approached, her voice tight with controlled anger, "you need to see this." She turned her scanner's display toward him, showing a three-dimensional image of Lyreley's skeletal system. Even with his limited medical knowledge, Marcus could see the problems immediately. Stress fractures in her ribs, malformed growth in her spine, and clear signs of malnutrition that suggested months or even years of abuse. "This child has been systematically mistreated," Dr. Kim continued. "The scarring on her hands and feet indicates exposure to industrial chemicals. Her growth has been stunted by poor nutrition, and these neural implant scars," she pointed to faint marks behind Lyreley's ears. "They've been using pain compliance devices on her." Marcus felt sick. Looking at Lyreley now, seeing how she flinched at sudden movements, how she kept glancing toward the exit as if planning escape routes, the full scope of what the hegemony had done to her became clear. "There's more," Dr. Kim said quietly. "I ran her DNA through the Galactic medical database. Kithurians don't just live for 100 years, Marcus. They live for over 500, which means this child is actually equivalent to maybe a 6-year-old human." The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. The hegemony wasn't just using indentured servants. They were using children, beings who wouldn't reach anything like maturity for decades. It was systematic abuse on a scale that made his stomach turn. "We can't let them take her," Dr. Kim said firmly. "I know," Marcus replied. "But if we don't, they'll shut down the station. Everyone here will lose their jobs, their homes." Dr. Kim was quiet for a moment, then looked down at Lyreley, who was watching them with those enormous violet eyes. "Some things are more important than jobs." Marcus spent the next hour sending messages through every communication channel he could access. Emergency calls to human colonial authorities, appeals to interspecies rights organizations, even desperate messages to news services that might be willing to publicize what was happening. But the responses were all variations of the same theme. The hegemony had legitimate legal documentation, and without clear evidence of fraud, no one was willing to intervene. The Interspecies Commerce Treaty that gave the hegemony their authority had been designed to prevent exactly this kind of interference. It prioritized trade stability over individual rights, and Marcus was discovering just how effectively it protected those in power. With 2 hours left before the deadline, Marcus was running out of options. He'd considered stealing a ship and running, but that would just make him a fugitive and wouldn't solve the larger problem. He'd thought about fighting, but 3 humans against an entire hegemony crew was suicide. Then Lyreley tugged on his sleeve. She'd been working with the translation system, painstakingly learning human words and phrases. When he looked down at her, she pointed to the communication console and spoke slowly in heavily accented standard. "Home, call home." Marcus frowned. "Lyreley, your home is controlled by the hegemony now. There's no one there who can help." She shook her head emphatically and pulled him toward the console. Her small fingers danced over the controls with surprising skill, entering coordinates that Marcus didn't recognize. The long-range communicator hummed to life, reaching across impossible distances to make contact with the Cathurian homeworld. The response was immediate and unexpected. The screen filled with the image of an elderly Cathurian, his blue skin marked with intricate tattoos that seemed to shift and flow like living things. His violet eyes were sharp and alert, and when he spoke, his voice carried an authority that made Marcus straighten instinctively. Lyrelay burst into rapid speech in her native language, tears streaming down her face as she gestured toward Marcus and the boots he'd given her. The elderly Cathurian listened intently, his expression growing darker with each word. Finally, he turned his attention to Marcus and spoke in perfect, unaccented standard. "Human Marcus Chen," he said formally. "I am Elder Thyron of the Cathurian High Council. My granddaughter tells me you have shown kindness to one of our lost children." Marcus felt his jaw drop. "Granddaughter? Elder, I'm honored, but I don't understand. The hegemony said your people were in debt, that you agreed to send workers to pay it off." Elder Thyron's eyes flashed with something that might have been rage, though his voice remained controlled. "The hegemony came to us when we were desperate, yes, but the agreement they forced upon us was obtained through deception and coercion. They promised medical aid and received mining rights to 3 uninhabited systems. There was never any mention of taking our children." The pieces began falling into place for Marcus. "They changed the terms after your people were already dependent on their aid." "Precisely. When we protested, they showed us documentation in hegemony script that supposedly proved our people had agreed to provide workers. Our translators had been compromised, our legal experts murdered by the plague. We had no way to fight their claims through proper channels." Marcus looked down at Lyrelay, understanding now why she'd been so insistent on making this call. "How many children have they taken?" "Over 3,000 from our world alone," Elder Thyron replied grimly. "And we have reason to believe they've done the same to at least 6 other species. The hegemony has perfected this technique of debt slavery, using bureaucracy and legal complexity as weapons against desperate peoples." The elder leaned forward, his expression intense. "But you, human Marcus Chen, you showed kindness to my granddaughter when you had no obligation to do so. You gave her your own shoes and protected her from harm, knowing it would bring trouble upon yourself." "Anyone would have done the same," Marcus said uncomfortably. "No," Elder Thyron said firmly. "Most would not. Most would look away, tell themselves it was not their concern, but you acted according to conscience rather than convenience. This tells me much about your character and your species." The elder was quiet for a moment, seeming to consider something carefully. When he spoke again, there was a weight to his words that made Marcus shiver. "Tell me, Marcus Chen, how much do you know about Cathurian history?" "Not much," Marcus admitted. "I know your people are supposed to be advanced, known for art and science, but honestly, what I've seen of Cathurian culture doesn't match the descriptions." Elder Thyron nodded slowly. "The hegemony has been very careful to control information about us. They prefer that the galaxy see us as a weak, primitive people deserving of our fate." His violet eyes grew distant. "But we were not always as you see us now, young human. Before the plague, before the hegemony, we were something very different." The elder's image flickered as he adjusted something on his end of the communication. Suddenly, the screen split, showing not just his face, but a view of the space around the Cathurian homeworld. Marcus gasped at what he saw. Dozens of crystalline structures hung in orbit around the planet, each one the size of a small moon. They pulsed with soft, beautiful light and seemed to sing even across the vacuum of space. As Marcus watched, some of the structures began to move, reshaping themselves into new configurations with fluid grace. "These are our city ships," Elder Thyron explained. "Each one houses millions of my people and contains technologies your scientists would consider impossible. We have been traveling the stars since before your species discovered fire." "But why haven't you fought back against the hegemony?" Marcus asked. "With technology like that, you could crush them." The elder's expression grew sad. "Because we are not a warlike people, Marcus Chen. For millennia, we have used our abilities to explore, to create, to bring beauty to the universe. The idea of using our gifts for destruction is difficult for us to accept." Marcus felt a chill of understanding. The plague wasn't natural, was it? No, it was a bioweapon specifically designed to target Cathurian neural pathways. The hegemony spent decades preparing their attack, studying our biology, learning our weaknesses. When they struck, we were completely unprepared. The elder's voice grew harder. They killed the artists first, the scientists, the philosophers, anyone who might organize resistance or expose their crimes. Lyrale spoke up from beside Marcus, her words now coming through the translator with growing fluency. "Grandfather, tell him about the debt chains." Elder Thyron's expression grew even grimmer. "The children they take are fitted with neural implants that cause intense pain if they attempt to escape or disobey. But more than that, the implants create a psychic link. Harm one child and all the others feel it. Kill one, and the psychic shock damages the others permanently." Marcus felt sick. They're using the children as hostages against each other. "Precisely, and because we Cathurians are naturally empathic, the suffering of our young causes us physical pain as well. Every day our children remain in hegemony hands, every moment they suffer weakens our entire species." The elder paused, studying Marcus's face. "This is why we have not simply destroyed them. Any aggressive action would result in the torture or death of thousands of innocents." The communication console chimed with an incoming priority message. Marcus reluctantly shifted his attention to see a text transmission from the station commander. "1 hour remaining. GCA demanding compliance. Sorry, son." Elder Thyron had clearly received similar information through his own channels. "The hegemony ship is preparing to depart with my granddaughter, and with you, Marcus Chen. Unless something changes within the hour, both of you will disappear into their slave camps forever." "I won't let that happen to her," Marcus said firmly. "I know you won't." The elder's expression grew thoughtful. "Tell me, what do you know of human history, your species' response to injustice?" Marcus frowned at the seemingly random question. "We fight back, I guess. Sometimes we win, sometimes we lose, but we don't give up. Yes, your species has a reputation throughout the galaxy for what others call aggressive altruism. You interfere in situations that don't concern you, fight for principles rather than profit, sacrifice yourselves for strangers." Elder Thyron leaned forward. "Most species consider this a weakness. They believe it makes humans predictable, exploitable." "Maybe they're right," Marcus said bitterly, thinking of his current situation. "No," the elder said firmly. "They are very wrong. Do you know what we Cathurians call humans in our oldest texts?" Marcus shook his head. "The catalyst species, because wherever you go, whatever situation you encounter, you change things. You make other beings want to be better than they are. You inspire." The elder's voice grew stronger. 3 years ago, when the hegemony first took our children, we despaired. We saw no path forward that did not lead to greater suffering. But today, one human showed kindness to one Cathurian child, and everything changed." "I don't understand." Elder Thyron smiled, and for the first time, Marcus could see the family resemblance between him and Lyrale. "For 3 years, we have been paralyzed by fear for our children. But watching you risk everything for my granddaughter's freedom has reminded us that some things are worth any cost. Some principles cannot be compromised." The display showing the Cathurian homeworld shifted, zooming in on one of the massive city ships. Its crystalline structure was reshaping itself, extending new sections and growing what looked like weapon emplacements. "We cannot save our children through violence," Elder Thyron continued. "But we can ensure that no other species suffers as we have. The hegemony has grown fat and lazy on easy prey. It's time they learned what happens when they threaten those under Cathurian protection." Marcus felt his heart racing. "Sir, what are you saying?" "I'm saying that as of this moment, humanity has the friendship and protection of the Cathurian Stellar Collective. Any harm done to humans will be considered an act of war against our people." The elder's smile grew wider. "And I'm saying that a Cathurian fleet is already en route to your position. They should arrive shortly after the hegemony ship departs." The implications hit Marcus like a thunderbolt. If the Cathurians were as advanced as they appeared, their arrival would change the balance of power in the entire sector. The hegemony's legal protections wouldn't matter if they were facing a military force capable of simply ignoring interstellar law. "But your children," Marcus protested. "If you attack the hegemony, they'll hurt them." "Yes," Elder Thyron said quietly. "Many of our children will suffer and die. The guilt of that decision will haunt me for the rest of my long life." His expression hardened. "But if we do nothing, the suffering will continue forever and spread to other species as well. Sometimes the right choice is also the hardest choice." Lyrale moved closer to Marcus, slipping her small hand into his. When she spoke, her words were clear and determined despite her accent. Grandfather right, better to fight and maybe lose than never fight at all. She looked up at Marcus with those enormous violet eyes. You teach me this. When you give shoes, you show me that some people fight for what is right, even when scared. Marcus felt something break open in his chest, a mixture of pride and terror and desperate hope. In trying to help one frightened child, he'd apparently started an interstellar war. But looking down at Lyrale, seeing the strength growing behind her fear, he realized he wouldn't change a thing. The question now was whether they could all survive what came next. The next 30 minutes passed in a blur of activity. Marcus found himself at the center of a storm of communication as word of the Cathurian fleet's approach spread throughout the station. His father appeared in the security office, his face grim but proud. Son, Commander Chen said quietly, you've started something that's going to change everything. I just gave a kid my shoes, Dad. No, you did something much more important than that. You reminded an entire species what it means to fight for what's right. His father looked down at Lyrale, who was teaching Dr. Kim some basic Cathurian words while the doctor checked her injuries. The GCA is in complete panic. They're trying to figure out how to handle a first-contact situation with a species that apparently has the technology to appear anywhere in the galaxy without warning. Through the station's viewports, they could see the hegemony ship preparing to depart. Its sleek hull gleamed under the artificial lights as cargo loaders finished securing their stolen goods and enslaved workers. The sight filled Marcus with rage, knowing that hundreds of beings like Lyrale were trapped aboard that vessel. Station control to all personnel, the announcement system crackled. Multiple contacts approaching from hyperspace, all hands to emergency stations. Marcus watched the scanner displays as reality itself seemed to tear open near the station. What emerged defied everything he thought he knew about space travel. The Cathurian ships didn't appear so much as they simply became visible, as if they'd been there all along waiting for someone to notice them. There were dozens of them, ranging from sleek escorts to massive city ships that dwarfed anything in the human fleet. They moved with impossible grace, their crystalline hulls singing harmonies that somehow transmitted through the vacuum of space directly into the minds of everyone watching. But it was the lead ship that took Marcus's breath away. It was smaller than the city ships but radiated a presence that seemed to bend space around it. Its hull was pure white crystal that seemed to contain flowing rivers of light, and when it spoke, its voice resonated through every communication system on the station simultaneously. This is the Cathurian vessel Harmony's Edge, flagship of the Stellar Collective Defense Fleet. We have come for our daughter and those who protected her. The hegemony ship's response was immediate and predictable. Their captain's harsh voice crackled over the open channel, full of bluster and legal threats. Cathurian vessel, you are interfering with lawful hegemony operations. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. The reply came not from Harmony's Edge, but from Elder Thyron himself, his voice carrying across space with quiet authority. Hegemony, Captain, you have exactly 1 minute to release all enslaved beings aboard your vessel and surrender yourself for trial. This is your only warning. You have no authority here, alien. The Commerce Treaty guarantees our right to collect legitimate debts. Any interference will be reported to the Galactic Commerce Authority. Elder Thyron's response was simple and final. The Cathurian Stellar Collective hereby withdraws from all existing treaties with species that practice slavery. As of this moment, we recognize no authority but our own in matters concerning the protection of sentient life. What happened next would be talked about in military academies for generations to come. The Cathurian fleet didn't attack in any conventional sense. Instead, they simply began to sing. The harmony that emerged from their ships was unlike anything Marcus had ever experienced. It seemed to reach into his mind and touch something fundamental about what it meant to be alive, to be conscious, to choose between right and wrong. Around the station, every sentient being stopped what they were doing to listen, tears streaming down faces both human and alien. But on the hegemony ship, something else was happening. The neural implants that controlled their slaves began to malfunction, overwhelmed by the psychic resonance of the Cathurian song. One by one, the pain compliance devices simply stopped working, their cruel signals drowned out by music that spoke of freedom and hope. Marcus watched through the station's sensors as chaos erupted aboard the hegemony vessel. The enslaved workers, free for the first time in years, turned on their captors with the fury of the long oppressed. Hegemony crew members who had seemed invincible just moments before found themselves overwhelmed by beings they had considered broken and helpless. "Grandfather," Lyreley whispered, her eyes glowing with pride and wonder. "They're free." The hegemony captain's voice returned to the communication channel, but now it was filled with panic. "Mayday, Mayday, our cargo is in revolt. We need immediate assistance." Elder Thyron's response was calm and implacable. "Your cargo consists of enslaved sentient beings. They are now under Cathurian protection. Surrender your ship and prepare to face judgment." "You can't do this. The Commerce Treaty means nothing to a species that chooses to exist outside your legal frameworks." The elder's voice grew colder. "You have 30 seconds to comply." The hegemony captain made the mistake that bullies always make when faced with genuine power. He chose to fight. Energy weapons erupted from the hegemony ship, targeting the nearest Cathurian escort. The beams struck the crystalline hull and simply stopped. Absorbed, converted, transformed into more of that beautiful, irresistible music. The Cathurian response was swift and absolute. The escort ship's hull flowed like liquid, reshaping itself into a configuration that hurt to look at directly. A pulse of energy emerged from its core, not the crude, destructive force of conventional weapons, but something far more sophisticated. It reached out and touched the hegemony ship systems, rewriting them at the quantum level. The enemy vessel simply stopped. Its engines died, its weapons powered down, its life support systems switched to minimal operation. It hung in space, completely helpless, while Cathurian boarding parties phased through its hull like ghosts. "How?" Marcus whispered. Dr. Kim, who had been monitoring the sensor readings, answered with awe in her voice. "They're not using conventional technology. They're manipulating reality itself at the subatomic level. They're turning matter and energy into art." Over the next hour, Marcus watched as the Cathurian fleet methodically dismantled the hegemony's entire operation in the system. Ships that tried to flee found themselves gently but firmly captured. Weapons that tried to fire discovered their energy converted into harmless light displays. Crew members who surrendered were treated with dignity, while those who resisted found themselves simply unable to continue fighting. But it was the liberation of the enslaved beings that brought tears to Marcus's eyes. Hundreds of them, from dozens of different species, emerged from the hegemony ships with wonder and disbelief on their faces. Many, like Lyreley, were children who had never known freedom. Others were adults whose spirits had been broken by years of abuse. The Cathurians received them all with gentle compassion, their city ships extending docking bays and medical facilities to care for the rescued slaves. Marcus watched as families were reunited, as beings who had given up hope discovered they could dream again. "Marcus," Elder Thyron's voice came through the communication system, now speaking privately to the station. "Bring my granddaughter home. Both of you have earned a place of honor among our people." Marcus looked down at Lyreley, who was still wearing his oversized boots. She had been watching the liberation with tears streaming down her face, but now she looked up at him with an expression of pure determination. "Grandfather wrong," she said firmly. Marcus frowned. "What do you mean?" "He say we both go to Cathurian ships, but your place not with us." She pointed toward the rest of the station, where humans and aliens alike were working together to process the rescued slaves, provide medical care, and begin the long process of healing. "Your place here with your people, teaching them what you teach me." "What did I teach you?" Lyreley smiled, that brilliant expression transforming her entire face. "You teach me that when someone need help, you help, even when scared, even when dangerous." She took his hand in both of hers. "Now I go teach other Cathurians, and you stay teach humans, and maybe